Hello, everyone. We welcome you all to the health webinar brought to you by JKYog and Radhakrishna Temple of Dallas. As we go forward, members of the audience can put their questions in the chat. Now, we all experience myriad challenges associated with COVID-19 as the infection soared globally and the world eagerly awaited the life-saving vaccines. While these are now available, less is known about the relative effectiveness across different brands, safety, dosage, and side effects. Also, many are anxious to know when the vaccines will be available for all adults and children. So to educate us on some of these issues and answer our questions on today's topic, which is COVID-19, vaccines and its variants, we are very fortunate to have with us an infectious disease specialist and an expert in the field. Please join your hands together to welcome Dr. Mamta Jain. Dr. Mamta Jain is a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center. She specializes in infectious diseases and conducts clinical trials to evaluate new therapies for HIV, hepatitis C, influenza, and now, of course, COVID-19. Dr. Jain earned her medical degree at Baylor College of Medicine and completed a residency in internal medicine at Baylor-affiliated hospitals. She received advanced training in infectious diseases through a fellowship at UT Southwestern. She also holds a master's degree in both statistics and public health from the UT Houston School of Public Health located in Dallas. During this pandemic, Dr. Jain was at the forefront conducting clinical trials to find effective therapies. She has delivered scores of international, national, and regional invited lectures, contributed to the book HIV and Liver Disease, and published a number of academic articles. She's a fellow of the Infectious Diseases Society of America and is on the board of directors of the HIV Medicine Association. She's also a member of the IDSA Guidelines Committee for Infection Prevention for COVID-19. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Mamta Jain.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to give this talk. It's a timely discussion as we are rolling out the vaccines. So let me go ahead and get started. And I will, can you guys see my screen?
Not yet. You have to start over, I think.
Okay.
In slideshow and share it again.
Okay, let me do that again. Hold on. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, you can see it. Okay. All right. So let's get started. So what do we know about COVID-19? So COVID-19 is due to a virus called SARS-CoV-2 and can result in a range of illnesses, from mild symptoms to severe illness and death. We don't know how SARS-CoV-2 will affect each person, but we do know that some can become really ill, especially those who are older or have certain medical conditions. How do we prevent COVID-19? Well, there's simple things that we should continue to do: wearing masks to cover your mouth and nose, avoiding contact with others, staying 6 feet apart, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, clean and disinfect frequently, wash your hands with soap and water, use hand sanitizer, things like that. But there is another method that can also help protect us, and that is COVID-19 vaccine. So the federal government is funding and coordinating the development of multiple vaccine candidates, several of which have already had phase 3 clinical trials and have been authorized under the emergency use authorization by the FDA. COVID-19 vaccines are being held to the same safety standards as all other vaccines. Nothing has been compromised. So let me just tell you a little bit about how a vaccine goes through development. So the first phase of a trial is to look at the vaccine in healthy volunteers. And this is to see, is this vaccine safe? Are there any serious side effects? How does the vaccine relate to those side effects? And does the vaccine cause an immune response? So these are small studies, 100 people or so, and they're healthy volunteers. They don't have any medical problems. Phase 2 is a larger study, and here they're looking at they're trying to answer the question, what are the most common short-term side effects? What's the body's immune response? And what are the signs of the vaccine is actually protective? And then finally in phase 3, they go into 1,000+ volunteers. And the research question that they're trying to ask is, how does the disease rates compare between those who get the vaccine versus those who get a placebo or they don't get the vaccine? And how well can the vaccine protect people from disease? And then once the vaccine is actually approved by the FDA, now we're in phase 4, and the FDA continues to monitor vaccines for effectiveness and for safety. Because remember, these trials are relatively done in smaller groups, even 1,000, 10,000, 15,000 is relatively small compared to the 300 million people, for example, that live in the US and that potentially can get vaccinated. And so there is a possibility that there may be safety or side effects that might be detected in that are very rare, that, maybe only 1 in 100,000 people might get, but we need to be vigilant and continue to look for those. So COVID vaccines are being held to the same safety standards, as I said. There's actually a committee. The FDA has a vaccine advisory committee, and then there's an independent ACIP, or the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices. And they make recommendations on all vaccines. And so both of these groups are independent committees composed of scientists and clinical experts that look at the data that these vaccine manufacturers collect, and they make sure that the standards are being held and that these vaccines actually are safe and effective. There's also a robust system to monitor for safety that exists. And then more recently, for COVID, the CDC started a new monitoring system called vSafe. And so that's a messaging system where you put in your symptoms, and it's a web-based service, survey monitoring. And so that is how they're also collecting safety data and learning about any kind of side effects that people may have. Mm-hmm. So COVID-19 vaccinations will help protect you from COVID-19. Getting a COVID-19 vaccine can help create an immune response in your body against the virus, and it may help you help you from getting severely ill, even if you do get infection. So it is possible that you could still get infected with COVID-19, but the hope is that even if you did, that the disease would be milder. It would not be as severe, and hopefully protect you from being hospitalized. And we hope that it will protect people and coworkers if you're vaccinated. COVID vaccination is a safer way to build protection. Getting the virus that causes COVID-19 may offer some natural protection. So some people say, well, if I get the infection, then I'll have my own antibodies that will protect me. And that is true. However, the risk of severe illness and death from COVID-19 far outweighs the benefits of natural immunity. So COVID-19 vaccination will help protect you by creating an antibody response without actually getting infected with the disease. So you get the benefit of immunity without taking the risk of getting severely ill. Now, both natural immunity and immunity produced by the vaccine are important parts of COVID-19 disease, and we're trying to learn more about that. But are concerned that natural immunity also may wane over time, and that's why it may be important to get the vaccine. And also, if you were immune to one strain of the vaccine, a different strain you may still be at risk for. The vaccination is one measure of how to help us stop the pandemic. While COVID-19 mRNA vaccines appear to be highly effective, additional preventive tools remain important. So until everyone is vaccinated, it is important that we continue to practice what the CDC recommends, which is to wear a mask, cover your nose and mouth, avoid close contacts, maintain social distancing, washing your hands, all the things that we have been doing all along through this pandemic. We can't let our guard down. We need to continue doing that, even if we've been vaccinated. None of the COVID-19 vaccines in use or under development use the live virus that causes COVID-19. People can experience normal side effects such as fever after vaccination. Their side effects are signs that the body is building immunity. The 2 mRNA vaccines currently authorized require 2 doses to get the best amount of protection. And receiving only 1 dose may not provide optimal protection. It does take a few weeks for the body to build immunity after vaccination. A person could be infected with the virus that causes COVID-19 just before or just after the vaccination and get sick. That's just because their body has not built the immunity. So again, it's important to be careful and vigilant, and not assume that just because you've gotten 1 shot that you are not going to get COVID-19. You have to. It does take some time to build the immunity. Now, what about getting the vaccine? If you get tested for COVID-19, will it test positive? No, the COVID-19 test is it's a molecular test or an antigen test, and it actually detects for virus, not for antibodies. And so you cannot. The vaccine won't make those tests become positive. Now, if you, however, got an antibody test for COVID-19, it may show that you have evidence of antibodies, and that may not indicate that you've had an actual COVID-19 infection. It may be the antibodies from the vaccine. And there's technical ways where you may be able to distinguish between a vaccine-induced antibody versus antibodies induced by natural infection. But I do want to mention that if you that it is possible that you could detect antibodies against COVID-19 if you had it measured after a vaccine. Should people who've been diagnosed, so if say 6 months ago you got COVID-19, should you get vaccinated? Because you can say, well, I had the infection and now have antibodies. But we do think that it's important to go ahead and get the vaccine because of the severe health risks associated with COVID-19. We want people to go ahead and get vaccinated. And we don't know how, again, as I mentioned before, we don't know how long natural immunity will last. There is some data suggesting that it does wane over time. And so that's all the more reason to be vaccinated. So what to expect before, during, and after your COVID-19 vaccine appointment. Before, learn about COVID-19 vaccines, see if COVID-19 vaccination is recommended for you, and that's is going to be state dependent. Every state is kind of doing it a little bit differently. Read the fact sheet that tells you about the specific COVID-19 vaccine that you receive. Tell your provider about your medical conditions. Get the vaccination record card, because that might be important, and stay on site for monitoring after the vaccination. After you've gotten the vaccine, you will need to get most of the vaccines, except for the Janssen one, require 2 vaccinations. And it's quite possible you might have some side effects. Usually they're local, arm pain, fever, some chills. And that's okay. That is expected. It will only last for a few days. Enroll in the VSafe program and let the CDC know about your side effects, and continue using measures to protect yourself, like masks and social distancing. All right, I am going to play a video which I came across that I think is a really nice demonstration of the different types of vaccines, because we're going to go into explaining the different vaccine types. So this is a nice video that kind of explains it.
All COVID-19 vaccines being developed aim to produce immunity to the SARS-CoV-2 virus by stimulating an immune response to an antigen, usually the characteristic spike protein found on the surface of the virus. Some traditional vaccines achieve this by modifying the virus to weaken or disable it, so that when introduced to the body, an immune response can be generated to the antigen, without the virus causing disease. When the immune system comes into contact with the weakened virus, its defenses, such as antibodies and T cells, attack the virus or infected cells. In the process, specialized memory cells take note of the specific antigen and prime the immune system to produce cells and antibodies.
Okay, I'm sorry. It looks like you guys cannot see the video.
Unshare this and share the video.
Okay, let me try this again. I apologize. So I need to go back into the Teams app.
Yes, and you can unshare on the trip.
Okay, sorry about that. Shoot. Let me see. I'm sorry. I am.
Okay. If you'd like me to play the video, I'll be happy to.
Oh, okay. Can you play it?
Yeah, absolutely. You could send me that link on the chat.
Oh, okay. Sure. Oh, hold on. I think now well. Can let me find the chat. Oh, here it is.
All COVID-19 vaccines being developed aim to produce immunity to the SARS-CoV-2 virus by stimulating an immune response to an antigen, usually the characteristic spike protein found on the surface of the virus. Some traditional vaccines achieve this by modifying the virus to weaken or disable it, so that when introduced to the body, an immune response can be generated to the antigen, without the virus causing disease.
When the immune system comes into contact with the weakened virus, its defences, such as antibodies and T cells, attack the virus or infected cells. In the process, specialised memory cells take note of the specific antigen and prime the immune system to produce cells and antibodies that will quickly target these proteins. So the next time that person is exposed to the same virus, the immune system is ready to fight it off. Instead of using the whole virus, another way to trigger immunity involves using just fragments of it, like the spike proteins. These subunit vaccines have the advantage of being relatively easy and cheap to produce, and are incapable of causing disease because these fragments are not able to infect host cells. However, they are less likely to be recognised by immune cells aimed at attacking infected cells, which means they may trigger a weaker immune response. Because of this, subunit vaccines often include chemical agents called adjuvants, which are designed to stimulate a stronger immune response, and booster shots may also be required. Not all vaccines are designed to introduce antigens to the body. Some work by using cells in a patient's body to produce the antigens themselves. Examples include viral vector vaccines and mRNA vaccines. In both cases, the goal is to get a short fragment of genetic code taken from the target pathogen, in this case the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, into the patient's cells. By hijacking the cellular mechanisms, these kinds of vaccines mimic the way viruses normally reproduce during natural infection. But rather than creating copies of the virus, the cells only produce large amounts of antigen that then usually trigger a strong immune response. Viral vector vaccines achieve this by inserting the genetic code for the antigen into a harmless virus, which effectively acts like a delivery system to get the code into the cells without causing disease. Vector-based vaccines can be complex to develop, but they can trigger strong immune responses without the need for adjuvants. And in theory, one type of vector can be used to deliver code for a range of different antigens, which can speed up vaccine development. Nucleic acid vaccines, like mRNA and DNA vaccines, also involve inserting genetic code into cells to produce antigens. But instead of using viruses to deliver the code, these vaccines take a more direct approach that involves inserting the code directly into cells, either by attaching it to a molecule or by forcing it into cells using a gene gun. These vaccines can be quick and cheap to develop, but they are a relatively new technology. With hundreds of COVID-19 vaccines now in development, it's likely that a mixture of different approaches will be needed in order to stop the global spread of this coronavirus and end the pandemic.
Okay, let me see if I can you guys see my screen again?
Yes.
Sorry about the technical difficulty. I just thought it was a very nice vaccine slide, and just graphically could explain the different types of vaccines. Let me go over some of these vaccines. So the two main ones that we have here in the US is the PFIZER BioNTech mRNA vaccine and the Moderna mRNA vaccine. Now, as I said, these were large phase 3 trials. They had 30 to 45,000 patients in each of the trials enrolled. And it was done, the Pfizer BioNTech was in the US, and Moderna was also in the US. It was a diverse group of participants from all different parts of the US. They had people who were older, 40% were 56 to 85 in the Pfizer one, and in the Moderna one, at least a fourth of the people who enrolled in these trials were over 65. And the reason that's important is because there may be differences in the efficacy of the vaccines in people who are younger than older. And so it's important that we have different distribution of participants. So we learned that. So this is the data from the PFIZER vaccine. And I just want to point out, so I think this graph is really dramatic. And so these blue squares is every case of COVID-19 that occurred after the vaccine was given. And some of them, you know, the vaccine's times 0. So some of them was within 1 or 2 days, the first week. So you know that they haven't really built antibodies, but you start seeing a difference. So the red line is the group that got the BioNTech, and the blue line is the PFIZER vaccine. And this is the cumulative number of cases. And you can see the blue line, which is the placebo group, the ones who did not get vaccinated, the numbers continue to go up over time. Whereas the group that got the vaccine, you see very few cases. There are some, this is not 100%, but it's very few relative to the placebo group, the control arm. So the difference between this is the vaccine efficacy. And then this graph, and you don't need to know all this stuff. This is just showing you by different age groups the efficacy of the vaccine. And the way they calculate this is they look at the number of cases, how many people got infected in the group that got the vaccine, and then how many were infected in the placebo group, and that's how they come up with this vaccine efficacy. And you can see that the vaccine is very effective. I mean, you have PFIZER was actually done in Argentina, Brazil, and the U.S. You had 6 cases in the U.S. and of those who got the vaccine, and 119 in the placebo. So just the magnitude of the difference is pretty remarkable. Now moving on, I know that you all have questions about, well, what about side effects? So like over here on the far right is just the vaccine. And so the people who, you can clearly see the people who get the vaccine do get side effects compared to those who get a placebo. Now the green is mild, the blue is moderate. So in terms of, you know, after your first dose, there is some side effects, and that occurs after the second dose. This is people 16 to 55. It does appear that those who are a little bit older, they may have a little bit less side effects reported, but there definitely is compared to those who got a placebo. What are those side effects? Well, they can, some people did get fever. Fatigue seems to be a fairly common side effect. Headaches occurred across the board. There were some people that had chills, not so much the vomiting and diarrhea. Muscle pain was not uncommon. And some people had some joint pain. So these are kind of local reactions, and if you have them, you shouldn't be alarmed. These can occur with the vaccine. Going on to the Moderna vaccine, you see the same graphs. Again, this is the placebo. The gray is the placebo arm, and you see the increased number of cases over time in those who got the placebo, and those who got the vaccine. The number of cases are much less. And this graph here just shows you the vaccine efficacy. This is overall, but you can see by age. So it does do, the Moderna vaccine does look the vaccine efficacy may be a little bit lower in those who are older, but there are fewer people, and so it's harder to make that estimate. That's why there's these this large level of uncertainty there. But otherwise, the vaccine in all of these subgroups, it does show to be effective. This dotted line is kind of, if you are on the other side of the dotted line, means that what doesn't work, and if you're on this side of the dotted line, then it does. So it does appear to be. I'm sorry, the dotted line is 100%. So all of these are going to be just the vaccine efficacy, but they're very close to 100%, 89 to 95. Okay, so in terms of adverse events, again, those who got placebo didn't report. There, maybe 25% reported some sort of adverse event, but you definitely see more reported in those who got the vaccine. So there's clearly a difference if you get the vaccine. Pain was fairly common, not so much redness or swelling, but fever in some, headaches was common, fatigue, muscle aches, joint pain. So these seem to be very common. This is the same thing that we saw with the PFIZER vaccine. So again, similar types of side effects. All right, moving on to the Janssen vaccine. So Janssen, the two ones that I just talked about are mRNA vaccines. So if you remember from the movie, the mRNA vaccine has a genetic material that goes into the cell and produces the spike proteins that induces the antibody response. The Janssen vaccine uses an adenovirus vector in which the genetic material is it's a double-strand DNA material for the spike protein is put in there, and then that goes into the cells, and then and our cells machinery produces those spike proteins on the surface of the cell so that it induces an immune response, antibodies against the virus. But what's different about this vaccine is that it only requires one dose versus the 2 doses. So, and it's because it's not an mRNA vaccine, which requires this lipid biolayer, which has to be kept really cold to maintain its integrity. This vaccine, which uses the adeno 26 virus vector, can be refrigerated, so that's gives it more flexibility. And then this trial was conducted in the U.S. and Latin America and South Africa. And the reason that this is one of the newer vaccines, and the reason that this is important is because we're now starting to see these variants, like the UK variant and the South African variant and the Brazilian variant. And so those will impact how effective the vaccine is, because and it will tell us, if the vaccine is effective against those variants. So overall, the efficacy for this vaccine is 66% in preventing severe to moderate to severe disease. In the US, it was a little higher, 72%, but again, it depends on where you're testing it. So in Latin America, where Brazil is, the efficacy is 66%. In South Africa, where we have the South African variant, the efficacy is 57%. However, that's probably really good compared to a lot of the other vaccines. It was 85% effective in preventing severe disease in all regions. So that's really, really severe, meaning, to the point where you may need to be hospitalized. So I think that's an important finding. That's one of the things, and because the Janssen vaccine was tested just more recently, it could actually be tested against these variants. So how many people? This was about 15,000 participants. Again, they had a diverse group of participants, including obviously people from all over the world, and they had about 34% that were over the age of 60. They also had a robust number of people that had comorbidities like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and these are diseases that could potentially put you at increased risk for disease progression if you were to get COVID-19. In terms of safety, they saw fever in about 9%, but overall it was a fairly well-tolerated vaccine. They didn't have any issues with anaphylaxis or any kind of adverse type of reaction to the vaccine. The next vaccine I want to mention is AstraZeneca. This is the UK Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. This is becoming kind of the vaccine that is being used kind of around the world. The WHO has adapted this vaccine. It is being given to many developing countries. It is uses a instead of using the adeno-26 vector vaccine or adenovirus, and they're using a chimp adenovirus, and there's technical reasons, but potentially one of the reasons the ad26 may run into problems is that some people may already have antibodies against it, and so then the vaccine may not work. But if you're using adenovirus that's not that isn't been around in the human evolution, people aren't going to have antibodies for it. And that was part of the reason that they use this. And again, it does the same thing. It delivers the double-stranded DNA material to the cells and then produces the spike protein so that our bodies can form antibodies. There's been 4 randomized trials done in the UK, Brazil, and South Africa. It does require 2 doses, and they in this group of trials, because there are several of them, they did obtain swabs to evaluate for asymptomatic infection, which was not done in the Moderna and PFIZER. So you couldn't look at things like transmission. Can the vaccine actually prevent you from transmitting disease? That was not evaluated in those other 2. So overall, the efficacy of the AstraZeneca, and you see the same thing in those people who got the placebo, there's increasing numbers of getting cases, but those who got the vaccine, the number of cases are significantly lower. And so overall, the vaccine efficacy is 70.4%, but there is a range. And so I'm going to try to walk you through some of this. Part of the confusion, I think, with AstraZeneca vaccine is that there was a mistake made in the delivery of the vaccine. So accidentally, there was a lower dose given, and so that created some problems. And so they analyzed that information separately, but they found that that it's possible that maybe giving a low dose followed by the standard dose might give you a higher efficacy of 90%. And initially that was what was theorized, that maybe that was important, because when they looked at the standard dose, 2 doses, they saw a vaccine efficacy of 59%. But then they started looking at the timing between the vaccines, and it does appear that may be important. I'll show some slides about that. So I'm not sure that the low dose versus high or standard dose is as important as perhaps the timing. And so this is just from some data from the prime boost strategy, and what you see here, so vaccine efficacy, so the higher the number is here, the more effective the vaccine is. And then this is the number of days between the first and the second shot. And what you see here is as the number of days increases, the efficacy of the vaccine actually goes up. And so and this is overall, this is for the standard dose, and this is for the low dose versus standard dose. But you see the same trend, which is the more time in between the doses, the higher the efficacy. And so it may be actually time between doses, and that's kind of the strategy the UK has taken, that they're trying to give more vaccines, and they're not trying to give, you know, within 3 weeks or 4 weeks. They're like, it's okay to even wait longer, but we want to get as many people at least one shot. So that's the strategy that they've taken, and there may be some benefit of that, but we'll see. Sputnik vaccine, that's the Russian vaccine. I don't have a lot of data. I only saw this press release. It is adenovirus vector vaccine, so kind of the same strategy as the Janssen and the AstraZeneca. They do use 2 different doses. It's not the same dose, and they do it 21 days apart. They report an efficacy of 91.4%. What's not clear to me is what's the age group of the people that they vaccinated? Do they have a diverse population? Did they just test it in one area where maybe it's just the wild type virus versus all these variants and stuff? So I think that information is still not clear. There's another vaccine called the Novavax. And that is also a 2-dose vaccine, but it is a different vaccine. It uses the subunit, so it actually uses the spike protein that's delivered, and then they have an adjuvant. So this is, again, a different method of making a vaccine, and they found an efficacy of 90% overall. However, when when they tested the vaccine in South Africa, where 90% of the population had this variant, the South African variant, the vaccine efficacy was it was 49%. So it really was not protective, because the FDA set a standard of at least having 50% or higher. And so that is potentially a problem for this vaccine. But otherwise, in the other strains, it does appear to be effective. Covaxin, I just wanted to bring this up because this is a vaccine that is that was made in India. It is an inactivated vaccine, so that means that they take the virus and they inactivate it or make it weakened. And then they use that virus to then induce an immune response. It's reported to have 81% efficacy in phase 3 trial, but the data is not published. So again, I don't know in terms of, the population and things like that, or safety, like what kind of reactions people had. But I bring this up because I think this is being rolled out in India currently. All right, so let me just try to summarize the difference. As you can see, there's quite a few vaccines globally available. They may not all be available in the US. So in the US, we have the Pfizer BioNTech, which is an mRNA vaccine. You need 2 doses, 21 days apart, good efficacy, but we don't know how it works against the variants. Moderna is, again, available in the US, mRNA, 2 doses, 28 days apart, high efficacy, but you do need the cold storage, and again, we don't know about efficacy against variants. Then we have the AstraZeneca, which is a viral vector, 2 doses. The time in between is a little bit up in the air because the trials did between 4 to greater than 12 weeks. And the efficacy ranges depending on how far apart, but it does have good efficacy. It is much cheaper to produce this vaccine than the mRNA vaccines, and it can be done, but you can store it in regular refrigerators. It does have efficacy against the UK variant. This was tested in the UK, and it does work in that population. Janssen is, again, a viral vector vaccine. This one is different because it's 1 dose. It does have efficacy of 66%, regular refrigeration, and it has efficacy against the UK and the South African variant. Novavax is the subunit adjuvant combination vaccine, 2 doses, 3 weeks apart, but does not seem to perform well against the South African variant, but otherwise has good efficacy. Sputnik, viral vector, 2 doses, 21 days apart, does seem to have good efficacy, at least what's reported, but we don't know about how it acts with the variants. And the Covaxin is an inactivated virus, 2 doses, 4 weeks apart, 81%. Does not require cold storage, but we don't know about the variants and how well it works with that. So that's kind of the vaccines. Let me talk a little bit about some of the contraindications for vaccination. So there are some people that getting the vaccine may not be a good idea. These are people who have had a severe allergic reaction to either COVID-19 vaccine or its components. This is going to be very rare because most people have not had the COVID-19 vaccine. But if for some reason you had a vaccine that had, for example, a ingredient called PEG, polyethylene glycol, or polysorbate, and you had a severe allergic reaction, and those people who've had that probably will know that, then those are the ones that we would probably tell them not to get this vaccine. But this is very rare. However, I do want to make sure people understand that if you have allergies to food or pet or venom or environmental allergies or allergies to other oral medications, that does not mean that you cannot take this vaccine. There is specific type of allergy that they're contraindicated. Otherwise, if you have other types of allergies, it's okay, you can still get the vaccine. Let's see, I'm not able to, let me try to move my slide. Okay, so this is just kind of some, what kind of reaction. I think the main thing that, and the reason that they monitor you for 15 minutes after you get the vaccine is for an allergic type of reaction where you can get hives and stuff. And we can treat this with Benadryl and stuff, but this is just kind of some of the symptoms that people might experience. Again, very rare, but we will monitor, we do monitor for that. So other questions about vaccines. Can you give the mRNA vaccine with other vaccines? So can you get your flu shot and your COVID shot at the same time? And the answer is right now, no. We want people to wait about 14 days from any vaccination. So if you're planning to get the COVID-19 vaccine, don't plan to get other vaccines during that time. Hopefully you've all gotten your influenza vaccine earlier in the season, so you should be okay to get the COVID vaccine. And if there are other vaccines, for example, zoster, those type of things, just wait to take those other vaccines later. Get the COVID one first. Other questions, what about someone who's received, so there's these monoclonal antibody therapies against COVID-19, so someone who's gotten COVID-19 and then got those monoclonal antibodies, should they get vaccinated? And it's not clear when it's the right timing to get vaccines after you've had one of these therapies, but right now the CDC is recommending that you defer for at least 90 days, just because we're not sure if you get antibodies treatment that, and again, those antibodies, those monoclonal antibodies, are antibodies against the spike protein, the same protein that the vaccine is trying to induce. There may be some interference and the vaccine may not work as well. So that's why delaying it may be better. All right, now going on to talk just for a few minutes about variants. So what is a variant? Why are we harping on these? So all viruses mutate because they replicate so frequently. There's always mutations occurring, but sometimes those mutations can be in areas that can cause the virus to behave differently. And that's what these variants are. And what they noticed with the UK, the Brazilian, South African variants is that those mutations that occurred actually made the virus more easily transmissible. So it was more easy to go from one person to the other. And that's the whole reason that we're really working very hard to try to get as many people vaccinated, because if these variants become more common, then more and more people are going to get are more likely to get the COVID virus, or more easily able to get it. But if you're vaccinated, then it can protect you from getting those. Now, what about how do these vaccines perform against the variants? Now, some of the data that I showed you actually is clinical data that's probably more important than what this data shows. This is actually just cells where they measure what's called neutralizing antibodies, and it does appear that there is lower efficacy or neutralized antibodies levels with both the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, especially when you are dealing with the South African strain. However, that does not tell us that it won't work, because we don't know what the right titer is to even show that you have, you know, immunity or protection. So yeah, it's lower than the other strains, but you know, how does that mean? What does that mean clinically? I don't think we still know. The other thing is that this is just measuring the antibodies. When you get vaccinated, not only do you produce antibodies, but you also produce T-cell responses, and those things may still be there. And so if you were exposed to the South African strain, those T-cell responses may help protect you. So again, we don't know yet. And so time will tell. Data is emerging that that the vaccines, there are some data from South Africa that suggests that, for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine may not be as effective, and as I mentioned, then Novavax may not be effective against the South African variant. So these are things just to be watchful of. The Pfizer biotech one appears to work in the UK, but those who are over 80, it may take a little bit longer for them to develop immunity. I do want to point out, so this is some real world experience, so not a clinical trial, but Israel has done a phenomenal job in vaccinating their population. I think they have almost 50% of their population vaccinated now. And this is the same curve. So the red here is not placebo, but unvaccinated. And the blue are the vaccinated people. And, you know, there's, you know, 500, there's a ton of people that have been, and you can see, so these are documented SARS-CoV-2 infections, and those who are unvaccinated, there continues to be an increase, whereas those who got vaccinated, the levels start to decrease or to plateau out. Symptomatic, so having symptoms of COVID-19, again, much lower in those who are vaccinated versus those who did not get vaccinated. What about hospitalizations? Again, a difference. Those who are unvaccinated, higher levels of hospitalizations, but those who got vaccinated, much lower levels of hospitalization. And then getting severe COVID-19, again, those who are not vaccinated at much higher levels versus those who are vaccinated. Same thing here. This is mortality or death due to COVID-19, higher rates of death due to COVID-19 in unvaccinated versus those who are vaccinated. So just to reiterate that this vaccine, even in the outside of clinical trials, real world data shows that it does help protect you. And so I think that's all the more reason. Okay, so post-vaccination, what can you do? You can meet with people in small groups with others who have been vaccinated without wearing a mask. The CDC says that's okay. You can visit with low-risk individuals in a single household. For example, grandparents who have been vaccinated can go and visit their grandchildren, even if the grandchildren have not been vaccinated. But it is still important to keep 6 feet distance in public. You should not wear, you should wear a mask in public. And we do want to discourage meeting in large groups indoors without a mask. All right, so just, I think I'm kind of running out of time. I'm going to just stop. These were just kind of summary of what I had talked about, but I know that we're running short on time, and so I just wanted to have opportunity for people to ask questions.
Okay, so thank you so much. So one of the questions that we received was, are the symptoms different for children and adults, given that it took time for the medical community even to determine when kids started getting COVID symptoms?
For COVID, yes, and I don't take care of children, so I'm not an authority on that. But my understanding is that children don't really have symptoms often. I think once you get into adolescence, then that's when they may start having fevers and chills and stuff. But often kids don't necessarily produce the same symptoms. There is a rare disease called that's this multi-focal like inflammatory syndrome that that has been reported in children, but it's not that common, but it can occur, and we have seen that. So. And that actually, it can also occur in adults too. And so that is something that we worry about. But otherwise, we do know that kids are, we don't see the mortality that we see in adults. And especially, and even in young adults, even when they do get sick, they do tend to recover and don't have the severe illness or complications that we see in elderly people.
Okay, well, thank you. Do we have time for one more question? So one question that we received was, why is it that certain ethnic groups are more susceptible to COVID than the others?
That's a really good question, and I don't think we know the answer to that. I think that it may not be as simple as its differences in genetics between one group of people versus another. I think it's actually much more complex. I think some of it may be that certain populations are kind of our frontline workers, and they are more exposed to the virus and therefore more likely to come in. So and have disease. It may be that there may be disparities in terms of access to medical care. So people who might have underlying diabetes and kidney disease and things like that, they may not have gotten care for that until they got sick. And then they're presenting for the first time. And so their disease is much more severe because of that. So there's a lot of things that I don't think we completely understand. And I think that's something that we need to look at. But there's definitely disparities when it comes to outcomes with COVID-19 and race and ethnicity.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Somebody is wondering whether in all these clinical studies, participants who are in the control group, after the study is over, do they receive their dosage of vaccines or not? This is an ethical issue, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So usually when they unblind the study, they do, especially if there's such a dramatic difference, then they do, those who are on the placebo are given the vaccine because it would be unethical not to.
Right. Fantastic. And then just one last question. Somebody sent a text message asking, I just got my shot 2 weeks ago. When they asked me to wait for 15 minutes, what would they know in 15 minutes?
So this is really where those allergic reactions is what we're that we're looking for, because those will develop usually pretty early on, and that's why they ask you to wait, because that's where you need quick medical attention. But if after 15 minutes you don't have anything, it's less likely.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jain. On behalf of JKYog and Radhakrishna Temple of Dallas, we express our sincerest appreciation to you. for being here in spite of your very busy schedule and giving us some insightful and informative session about COVID-19 and the different variants. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Pooja for some announcements. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. JKYog and Radhakrishna Temple have been, organizing a lot of online events, as we know, and one of at least two exciting events coming up. One this weekend and the one after that. First of all, this week has been the International Gita Festival that has been going on from 15th to the 21st. To conclude it, we'll have a nice discussion with Swami Mukundananda ji and J.R. Rao on Bhagavad Gita. It's on March 21st at 9:30 a.m. So do look out on YouTube. Another big festival we have at the Radhakrishna Temple, and of course JKYog is organizing it, is the Global International Women's Day Awards ceremony. So we will be having a full grand ceremony presenting these accomplished women and encouraging many more inspiring women. And I would love to say, last year our Dr. Jain was one of the nominees and award winnees, and this year we are happy to do it like an online event. So do attend. I would like to play a short video to describe what this event is about and how we're going to do.
JKYog presents the most prestigious and much awaited event of the year, International Women's Day Awards Conclave 2021, for honoring the distinct qualities of womanhood, endurance, perseverance and love for the community on March 27th at 10 a.m. CST or 8:30 p.m. IST. Hear their stories, awe-inspiring talks by world-renowned women leaders who chose to challenge. Sindhutai Sabkal, Dr. Swati Mohan, Dr. Smita Naram, Dr. Medha Tadpatrikar, and a keynote speech by Swami Mukundanand. Special address by Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. Join us in an eye-opening panel discussion with renowned panelists on gender equality and interactive Q&A segment. Kickstart your motivation. Support the women in your life, in your community to take on more and reach their goals. For participation details, please visit radhakrishnatemple.net.
I love trying to find my...
With that, we come to the end of today's health seminar, and we look forward to all of you joining the daily Bhagavad Gita at